You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers!
Today on the Air with Florenza, I'm thrilled to welcome the brilliant and sharp-witted Karen Dukess, author of the irresistibly clever and delightfully wicked new novel, Welcome to Murder Week. A story where seaside calm meets academic chaos, secrets bubble hotter than summer asphalt, and everyone has something to hide. Please put your hands together and welcome Karen to the show. Thank you so much, Karen, for joining me on this episode of On the Air with Florenza, where in just a few minutes, we're going to talk about not one, but two of your books. And I'm super excited because I didn't know about one of those. So I feel like I'm going to learn a lot today. Before we get started, we're going to toast to a fantastic show. And you have,
I have tea. I could say that it's spiked, but it's not. It's just tea.
should your pinky be out because you're very
Oh,
Jane Austen?
all right.
Should that
Yeah,
be?
very Jane Austen today. There you go. Well,
Well,
your drink looks kind of more fun.
I am being very Florenza today. I've taken a break from some of my normal cocktails. Um, I kind of had a weird scare and I backed off for a minute, which resulted in the loss of 15 pounds. But I'm
Oh.
back to my shenanigans. And and it's tequila with some type of multiple juices that I just poured. So
Nice.
here we go.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oof, how I've missed you. Okay. And today we are talking about such a delightful project that incorporated some pretty phenomenal writers all coming together for this one project titled Ladies in Waiting, Jane Austen's Unsung Characters. Tell us a little bit about this project, Karen, and a little bit about yourself.
So this project, here's the book. It just came out yesterday. It's such a fun project. I was so happy to get to be a part of this. So this is a collection of 8 stories by 9 authors. One of them is written by 2 authors, that are about minor characters in Jane Austen novels. And a lot of the authors are romance writers. Particularly Sarah MacLean and Eloisa James, Nikki Payne, and then other writers that are pretty well known, Adriana Trigiani, Diana Quincy, Eleanor Lippman, Audrey Beleza, and Emily Harding. And so most of them are taking small characters who are sort of either ridiculed in the books or overlooked or not necessarily, not the central characters, and give them their own stories and their own sort of happily ever afters. And I was thrilled to participate in it. I was asked uh, by an editor at the publishing company that published my novel that came out in June, which I'll talk about later, if I had an idea for this, if I were going to write about one of these characters, who would I write about? And I was like, oh, that would be so much fun. I would write about Georgiana Darcy, the younger sister of Mr. Darcy in Pride and
Mhm.
Prejudice, who doesn't really speak in the novel. She's only, people refer to things she said, but she doesn't actually have any quoted lines. And I thought I would like to imagine her in midlife at age 27, because life expectancy was lower then,
Yes.
as a married mother with 2 kids in a good marriage, but kind of having a bit of a midlife crisis and having obsessive thoughts about Wickham, the man she was saved from eloping with by her older brother. So that was the story I wrote. And it was my first time writing any sort of like fan fiction, trying to write like a Jane Austen-ish story.
Yeah.
It was really fun to do. And the stories in here are really, really fun. There's Caroline Bingley from Pride and Prejudice, and there's 2 stories of Miss Bates, who's made fun of in Emma. She gets a much happier ending, 2 different versions by 2 different authors. There's a younger sister of the youngest of the Dashwood sisters in Sense and Sensibility. There's a story that imagines Caroline Bingley from Pride and Prejudice as a white passing woman of color in New Orleans, high society, and it's sort of
Yeah.
a road trip story. So they're really imaginative and really fun to read. I was just rereading them yesterday, sitting by the fire, super cozy. It was really fun. And I was really happy to get to do this because I've been a big reader my whole life. I'm a late blooming writer. I was a journalist and a speechwriter, but I didn't start writing fiction until I was in my 50s.
Hmm.
And all of the, well, all two of the books that I've had published, I had one not published, reference books a lot. And there's a lot of reference to Jane Austen in my second novel. So I've long loved Jane Austen. I never thought of trying to write something about one of her characters. It was really fun. It's a really fun book.
That was going to be my question. Were you previous to this a Jane Austen lover? And what was it like following, in some regards, in the steps of someone who is so well known, and to take one of her characters and breathe a different life into her? What was that like?
It was actually really fun. I mean, I have been a Jane Austen lover, for my whole reading life. But what was intimidating to me more than trying to continue with the Jane Austen character was just writing a short story because I'm not a
Mm,
short story writer. I didn't
hmm.
get an MFA. And like when people get an MFA and they study creative writing, they usually write a lot of short stories
Yeah.
and they read a lot of short stories. That wasn't my route. So I was sort of intimidated by writing a short story, but I had this idea about Georgiana and I found it really fun to start a story with the parameters already set. Like
Yeah.
I knew who her brother was, I knew her family history,
Yeah.
I knew the facts of her life as much as was revealed in Pride and Prejudice. So it gave me sort of like a framework.
Hmm.
And then I could just sort of imagine her as an older woman. I think my story is probably the least dreamy romantic in this collection because I give her what I call a happy-ish ending,
Uh-huh.
not necessarily a happily ever after sort of story because she's already a lot of these stories end with a couple coming together or
Hmm.
like Jane Austen a wedding. This is like, okay, this is not one of the characters who ends with the wedding in Jane Austen, so I'm going to take her past her wedding into her marriage, and sort of
Yeah.
look at that. So it was fun. It was really fun.
Nice. I love that. Some questions about you, because listen, I said before we came on the air that you are pretty badassery, my dear. Like you, just researching you, I was like, oh my Lord, what hasn't she done? You're my kind of lady. I love it. So I want to dive into, you've been a newspaper reporter in Florida, a magazine publisher in Russia, and even a UN speechwriter on gender equality. Quite the original story. Which version of Karen the writer showed up in your Austen piece, and what did she bring to the page that surprised even you?
Ooh, interesting question. Um, hmm. I think that I think the version of Karen the writer that showed up in the Austen piece is really the version that I always wanted to be. So all these interesting things I did were interesting and they were fun, but they were never what I really wanted to be doing. When I
Mm,
was a kid, I would make up stories, just like I made up this story about Georgiana Darcy. And I would often do it with a little assignment. Like I remember in elementary school, one of my teachers would give us like a couple of shapes on a page, and she would say, attach the shapes into a drawing and then write a story about the drawing. And I love that kind of thing. So I love the idea of having not just sort of open-ended, like write a story about anything, but something that sort of sets you off,
yeah.
and then you just fulfill the assignment. And so that's what I loved about this. So all my careers I think I always wanted to be a fiction writer because I did that as a kid and I loved it. But then once I got to be a teenager and in college, it became like a
Yeah.
serious thing, not a fun thing.
Yeah.
And it was very intimidating and I was very self-critical. And I thought, well, I just want to do this for fun. I don't really know what I want to say. I don't have anything important to say. I kind of put myself down. And so I kept doing writing things, but I was sort of like, oh, I'm not cut out for fiction writing. So I kind of the jobs I did were kind of moving around that. I went into journalism, which was really fun and I
Mhm.
liked it, but I was always in it for the writing more than the reporting. My husband's a journalist and he's very much like, find the story, find the facts,
Uh-huh.
you write in order to reveal the story. I was sort of like, oh, I don't care about the facts. I just want to write. I did care when I was
Right,
in
right.
business, but my heart wasn't completely in it. And so the jobs I did, I mean, I did study Russian in college, and that's what sent me on this path to end up working in Russia as a journalist. Um, and I love that.
Hmm.
But writing was always the thing that was like calling to me. And I didn't get serious with writing fiction until I was almost 50. And I was working part-time as a speechwriter at the UN. I was working 3 days a week. I had little kids that I wanted to have some time for. And then I was asked to join a writing group just by chance. Someone was like, we're looking for a new member. I've heard, you like to write. Do you want to do it? And I said, sure. And
Uh-huh.
it was in that writing group that I started playing around with fiction and writing something that eventually became the first novel that I sold. And then it was like,
Nice.
wow, now I'm really doing what I want to be doing. So
That was going to be my question. When you finally stepped out of your own way and penned that first book, did you hear the younger Karen inside of you cheering loudly?
completely. I really did. When I started writing that book, it started out, I was writing a piece of memoir. That book is called The Last Book Party and it came out in 2019. And I was writing it, and then we had to bring in each week different, we had to bring writing into the writing group each week. And I was writing, and one day, just like a fictional character appeared. I'm like, well, this isn't memoir anymore. I don't know
Yeah.
what this is. And my writing group was just like, just keep going. You'll figure it out. Just keep going. And they kept encouraging me to keep going and not worry that I didn't know. And that was very foreign to me because as
Yeah.
a journalist and a speechwriter, like you got to know what you're writing about.
Correct.
But with fiction, you got to let go a little bit for the fun stuff to start happening. And so I just kept going. And then for a couple of years, I was working on that. And when it started coming together as a novel, just I wanted to finish it so badly. I wanted to publish it, but the real thing motivating me was to do this thing I had wanted since I was a
Yeah.
kid. Like I was really afraid that I was going to get to be 90 years old and saying, someday I want to write a
Yeah.
novel. And so when I finished the novel, before I had an agent, I remember the moment so well. I remember sitting there and just being like so fulfilled and so happy. And the things that happened after with getting an agent and publishing it were incredibly exciting. Those were all
Yeah.
like pinch me moments, but
Uh-huh.
in a different way.
Yeah.
That moment of like, oh my God, I did it. This thing
Yes.
like I kept starting and stopping and not doing for so many years and talking about and,
Yeah.
hating myself for talking about it, not doing it. It just felt so good to do it.
Oh, well,
And one of
congratulations.
the things that helped me, which is kind of funny, because of course when you have a project that you want to do it well.
Yeah.
But I remember at some point what was really helpful to me was to kind of like lower my expectations when I realized instead of having self-doubt about like, could I write a good novel? I was like, wait a second, my goal is just to write a novel, to not be 90 and still saying I want to write a novel. So it doesn't have to be good to achieve that
Uh-huh.
goal.
Uh-huh.
I just have to be, I just
Just
have to,
write it.
I just have
Yes.
to keep going. And so that was very liberating because then you just like, oh, I can do that. I can write a
Hmm.
bad novel. And then I think I wrote a good novel, but thinking that I didn't have to write a good novel help take the pressure off of just do
Yeah.
the thing you want to do. Don't worry, so much about how good it's going to be. But like deal with that later.
Who was your biggest support system, or who was your biggest supporter in the process of learning to let go of the not you side of thinking, because that the journalist and the speechwriter wasn't the true Karen. That was the adult Karen, right? Like
Yeah.
taking care of business. Who was there to support you when you had to let go of the safety net and step into the fun part and cheer you on to keep going?
I think mostly it was a man named Steve Lewis, who is a writer, who's quite a bit older than I am. He's in his late 70s now. And he was the leader of the writing group.
Mm-hmm.
He had been a teacher, college teacher of writing, and a high school teacher, I think. And he was the one who made me understand that you could discover your voice by writing or discover what you wanted to say in the process of writing, that you
Ooh,
didn't have to figure it all out, and that to just trust in that and to let the story reveal itself and just to keep going. And I think every week he would say the same things to me, like, just let the story really, like, you're going to figure it out. Like he
yeah.
was, and he was so patient. There was no sense of hurry up, and there was generally his feedback would be focusing on what was good in what I was doing. He wouldn't tell
Mhm.
me how to fix things. It was just kind of very positive and very encouraging, and encouraging me to just like relax and stop with the self-criticism so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never would have written the novel if I hadn't been in a writing group and the other writers in there as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Library Journal says the collection captures the spirit of Austin for a new era. What does Austin for now mean to you on the sentence level and in the themes that you chose to amplify?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, on the sentence level, I don't think any of us can really write like Jane Austen, you know? So I
Yeah.
tried to write in a way that would feel I'm still writing in the same period as Jane
Mm-hmm.
Austen. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
writers are taking it to different time periods, so that can be freeing because
Mm-hmm.
and Jane Austen was so clever, so witty, her observations so good that I don't know that any of us have achieved sentence level with Jane Austen. But in terms of the stories, I think I wrote about Georgiana being sort of tortured by her memories of Wickham and what she felt physically when she
Yeah.
was so young and didn't understand what it was. And now she's married and she does understand what it is and she's happy with her husband, but it's like she's been married for a while. It's a little routine. He's a respectable man, but like, where's the spark?
Yeah.
And so her having obsession about that and thinking about that, I don't think is something you would have read in Jane in the time period. So I sort of bring like a modern day midlife crisis approach to
Mm-hmm.
someone who doesn't have 8 million books and blogs to read
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it. And then some of the other books, some of the other stories as well, do something different. Like there's one where a character finds happiness, there's romance and love, but it centers around her not wanting to be married and
Ooh.
not wanting to commit to having children, but wanting to be with the person and have the fun and the love and the passion and the romance. So it's not that traditional marriage plot thing. It's putting it in a more modern context, that there's not just one route to everything being happy. Um, and some of the stories look at characters that in the books are seen as like the spinster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they go deeper into that to show what things are really like for this person, and they're not sort of just put in that pigeonhole. They get their moment of having like a full range of emotions and full romance. I think all the stories are really well written. They do have the feel of like reading Jane Austen, but not,
Mm-hmm.
nobody's
Yeah.
Jane Austen, but
Yeah.
Jane
Yeah.
Austen.
Yeah.
But they do give that feel. I mean, I do think if you like Austen, they're really fun to read. They really are.
Being someone who is semi older than your character, not by much.
Oh, okay, by a lot. I could be her mother.
Yeah, if you were fast, but not only if you were like an early
I
starter.
don't know. I'm probably older than you think. But anyway, go on.
Now, how was it taking your lived experiences and backing it up to a 29-year-old and walking her through these challenges from a different perspective? Did you feel that having that knowledge of real life, that it allowed you to give her balance in her decisions, or did you completely take yourself off and say, no, I want to relive that moment of being 29 and not knowing, right? And trying to
Oh,
figure this out.
yeah. No, I think I definitely brought my life experience to it. So if you think about it, in the novel, she's supposed to be almost 15 or 15 when she, nearly
Hmm.
elopes. That's very young.
Yeah.
And I put her at 27, married for 7 years and with kids. And the life expectancy back then was probably 50 in the
Yeah.
50s or something,
Yeah.
if you didn't die in childbirth. And so I really kind of imagined her in a midlife situation, and kind of saying, is this it?
Mhm.
And but I wanted her to kind of have a realization that would relieve her of this sort of like torturous obsession about what if, what if, what if. So I am happily married, but I've been married a long time. So I know the difference between the new and the midlife.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I definitely, sort of brought that. I wanted to bring her to a different place where she could feel freer with her emotions. She could still fantasize, but also kind of be happy with what she has and, not beat herself up about, like, I'm supposed to be a good wife and mother, yet I'm obsessing about this man from my teen years, that kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think I wanted her to gain some wisdom quickly in the course of a short story.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Was there a part when you were writing her story, especially with that longing for something else, that you realized that at one point that was you, career-wise, not life-wise, career-wise? You're this writer, you're this report,
Hmm.
this reporter, you're doing these super crazy things where even your children thought you were a spy, and I'm still not certain that you weren't. But yet there is this longing in your heart for something else. How did that correlate to the story that you were
I
creating?
haven't thought about that, but it's funny because so much goes into fiction that you don't think about.
Yeah.
Um, So probably there was, some of that in there, like a sense of yearning. I mean, I think
Hmm.
that's really what this story is about. This character
Hmm.
is yearning for something that she wants, and she's comparing it to something in the past that she didn't want. So why is she yearning for it? What is it about? What is that going on? So yeah, that's probably in there, even though it wasn't something I was conscious of. But that's
Yeah.
the fun thing about writing. Sometimes you don't even realize what you've written
Yep.
wholly until you're done.
That's so true. So, as the host of Castle Hill Author Talks, is it pronounced true row?
It is hard to say. Truro. It is very
True.
hard to say. Yeah, it's a town on Cape Cod.
Nice. You're often the interviewer. What questions do you wish more interviewers asked writers about short fiction, and how would you answer it for your story here?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I mean, I don't write a lot of short fiction, and
Hmm.
I think I've interviewed two short story writers. I interview mostly fiction writers, some nonfiction. It's a series on Zoom, like you're doing here.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I have one question I ask all of them, so that's hard to answer, but I definitely, one of the things I do when I interview these writers, and it's always focused on one book,
Hmm.
um, I usually have read the book twice because I'm reading it once to figure out if I want to interview them, and then I read
Yes.
it again before the interview. And I don't usually do that because who
Hmm.
has time to read books twice?
Yeah.
And there's so much to read. But reading it the second time, I always find things that I didn't think to ask about. So, um, yeah, I wish that when someone's doing an interview that's just like a deep dive into a book that, that they've read it really well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I do like questions like yours that make me think of something I hadn't thought about before about the book, you know?
Uh,
It's always a pleasure when I interview someone and they say, "Oh, nobody's ever asked me that
yeah.
before." writers go on with the interviews, so I'm having that experience with you, which is very nice.
Oh, excellent. Let's see. When I tell you my questions for you were just all over the place because I am very intrigued with your life, my friend. You've written very different novels. We talked a little bit a minute ago about The Last Book Party and the recent USA Today bestselling, Welcome to Murder Week. What muscles from those novels did you flex or deliberately not flex when writing a tight, character driven short story in Austen's world?
Oh, that's another good question.
Thank y'all.
Well, I think I didn't flex a lot of the angst, if one could flex angst,
Yeah,
because writing a short story I found is really fun because it's short.
yeah.
So to kind of like have one idea for the book, I mean, for the short story, like
Hmm.
I'm going to write about Georgiana at 27, having a midlife crisis, being tortured by obsessive thoughts about the man she nearly eloped with, even though she's now in a respectable marriage. That's like enough for a
Yeah.
story. In a novel, you sort of want to have a little more than that.
Hmm.
So in this one, which is Welcome to Murder Week, which
Yeah.
came out in June, initially the idea, this was inspired by a trip I took to the English countryside with my sister. We went to the Peak District in England, and it was so enchanting. And I felt like I had walked into the pages of Jane Austen novels, and mysteries, British mysteries that I'd seen on TV, Masterpiece Theater, Masterpiece
Yeah.
Mystery, BritBox, all of that. And so everything I did, I was seeing through the lens of fiction. And when I got back, I decided I wanted to write a novel about Americans going to England and having that same kind of experience.
Uh-huh.
And I decided I would write about America. I felt when I was in England like I was in a mystery show because it was like these quaint little towns where you expect
Yes.
to see, a nosy neighbor and a vicar and all the classic things. I kept expecting that the whole time I was there.
Uh-huh.
So when I came back, I was like, okay, I'm going to write a novel about Americans going to England to participate in a solve a fake mystery contest, which is a really fun idea. But as I was writing, I'm like, okay, but what is it really about? It has to be
Yeah.
about more than that. And I have a main character who's goes on this trip because her late mother had purchased the tickets for her, but she was estranged from her mother. She didn't know why her mother wanted to take her to England. So I started developing a real mystery of this, why did her mother want to take her to England? And then I have these other characters, and I'm like, well, why are they there?
Yeah.
And so in novel writing, you have to go many, many layers of stories. In the short story, I didn't have to do
Hmm.
that. And also,
Hmm.
Jane Austen sort of handed me, here's your character, here's her background. And I could just write a whole story that is centered on one day, and I know sort of what I wanted, her to be obsessed about, and I wanted something to happen that would sort of break the obsession, and it was a much simpler process. And so I
Hmm.
could spend more time just focusing on the language and crafting this, a couple of scenes to make this happen. So I didn't have to flex all that layering when with the novel you're constantly asking yourself, but what is it really about? That's
Hmm.
the story,
Hmm.
that's what they're doing, but what is it really
Yeah.
about?
Which of the two do you see yourself just kind of popping your tent to say, this is the space that I really want to make my mark in literature?
Novel writing.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I never, I mean, writing the short story was really fun. And it's
Hmm.
also really fun to write something that you spend a couple of months on instead of a
Yeah.
couple of years. And then it's in a book. Like,
Yeah.
that's really fun. Um, but yeah, but I do tend to, I don't read a lot of short stories. I
Hmm.
really I mean, I've read some and I do enjoy it, but I'm drawn to sort of the meatier, longer, immersive
Hmm.
experience. And I read pretty fast, so I can read a novel and, it doesn't take a long, long time. So I can jump in like for a day or a couple of days and be really in that world and then move on. And so
Oh, nice.
I like to read and write those kinds of things.
Okay. My last question for you, because I have so many. Let me see. Okay, this one is specific to um the book. Ladies in Waiting. If a reader picks up Ladies in Waiting, having never read Austen, what do you hope your story teaches them about her wit, moral imagination, and quite savagery? And what do you hope they carry into their first novel that they would read afterwards?
Oh, um, well, I would hope that they would realize that a novel that takes place in a narrow world can still be a big novel. I
Oh,
think
I
that's the
like
thing
that.
about Jane Austen for people who haven't read Austen. It's like they're in drawing room. My husband is not a big Jane Austen reader, to say the least.
Uh,
Think he's read any, but he kind of like enjoys poking fun at me. Like, have they left the drawing room yet? Like, these are stories about women's lives when they did not have huge options of going out in the world. They took walks and they did needlepoint and took a turn around the room, but then in all of these stories, even though they're very much focused on these lives that women are leading, most of these stories at a time where they were very restricted in what they could do, there's still all the emotion of big novels. There's betrayal and there's yearning and there's romance and there's heartbreak, and there's maturing, and that it can all be in there. So I would think any of these stories would kind of establish that, and maybe encourage someone like, okay, so maybe a story, hundreds of years ago set at a time when women couldn't do anything could still be really interesting and moving.
yeah, I love that. Where are the listeners able to engage with you and follow you and become a fan?
I probably the best place is Instagram. I'm at Karen Dukess on Instagram. I post mostly about books. There's a lot in the past couple months about Welcome to Murder Week, and now a lot
Yes.
about Ladies in Waiting because they're what's new. But I try to post a lot about what I'm reading, what I'm loving, what other authors are doing. Yeah, it's a very bookish place for me, Instagram. And I also have a Substack called Keep Calm and Carry On, um, where I write about everything. It started out writing about themes tied to Welcome to Murder Week, English
Mhm.
villages, English literature, mysteries, cozy-ish mysteries, that kind of thing. But I write about everything, but it's very bookish. So
Nice. I had a question for you, and it just went
I could see
out
that. I
my
could
head.
see you just hit one of those blank spots. It
It
just was like,
did, like, whoop. Okay. Are you a person that allows yourself, and clearly the answer is no because you're releasing two books in 1 month, but are you the person that really do allow yourself to celebrate your win before you jump immediately into something else? Or has Karen already dipped her baby toe into the next book?
well, I'm definitely a person who allows myself to celebrate probably a little too much, Like I have
Never
a
too
friend who
much.
finishes one book and is like on to the next, like immediately. But I have already dipped my toe, but I took a big break. So there's a lot of time between when a book is
Yeah.
sold to a publisher and when it comes out, usually a year at
Mhm.
least. And so I was writing last winter, starting a new novel. I was hoping to get a draft done before Welcome to Murder Week came out, but I did not. But I had enough going that I knew if I took a break for book touring and interviews and just being like victory lap,
Uh,
that when I went back to it, I would have something going. So I'm getting back to it now. But yes, I definitely. But it's
nice.
hard because, every interview, um, you're always asked, what are you working on next? It's like the minute you publish a book, people are like, what are you doing next? And you're like, come on, I just, and
Yeah.
I ask authors that all the time. And I feel so bad because like they just published a book. They should just be lauded for that. And it's always like, what do you got for me now? What's next?
I know. I just gave birth to the baby. Stop asking me. My husband can't even
Exactly.
look at me yet.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah,
Give our brains time to shrink.
it's true.
I just stretched and gave birth to a book baby.
It's
What's wrong with you?
true. It's true.
So I have one or two questions that I'm going to ask for the end segment that I call one for the road. Let me see. So we're going to take a sip. You, your tea, me, my
Okay.
tequila.
Lucky you.
Mm. Whew. Listen, it's been a minute. Yes. And my regular listeners know I never, ever, ever use mixers in anything. So when this show airs, quite possibly they're going to be reaching out asking what's wrong. Because we had to just go easy. Let's see. All right. I have for you true or false. You once bribed your muse with snacks, wine, and seaside walks, and it worked.
True.
Really?
Muse. Well, walks work. Walk.
Nice. Okay. That's awesome. Let's see. Oh, just between us. What's a book on your shelf that would totally surprise readers? Something that makes people say, Karen Dukess reads that?
Oh boy. Well, I read everything, honestly. I hate when people talk about guilty reads, guilty pleasures, because I'm like, there should be no guilt about reading anything.
Yes,
Whatever
ever.
you want to read. So I read everything. Um, you know, my family has a house in Cape Cod, and for years my mom would keep like old books, just and way after childhood, I would be known to like pick up a Nancy Drew and read it. And not even one of the newer Nancy Drews, but like one of the ones my mom read, like really old. I'm very nostalgic for reading books.
Oh,
So like I'll just pick up some old, children's book even and read it. I wish I could
oh.
think of a I wish I could think of a specific for you. Well, I have a book called The Joys of Yiddish that my grandmother had that I really love because it's really funny. And it explains Yiddish words with situations. So, like it
Uh-huh.
defines a word by giving a situation. Like a schlemiel is the guy who spills the soup, and a schlemazel is the person who gets soup spilled on them. I love that book. It's hilarious. It's a
And
dictionary of Yiddish expressions, and there you go. So,
Lorraine and Shirley's song just popped in my head because I never knew Shamil,
oh,
Shemazo.
all right, there you go. Well, then you need to get the joys of Yiddish too.
I will get the Joyce of the Yiddish. That is fabulous. That is such a great place to end the show.
I literally just turned around and saw that one in the bookshelf. So, yeah, Nancy Drew and the joys of Yiddish. But then again, if you knew me, you would be like, that's not all that surprising.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. That's it. And so you've never had a book that you've had to put the cover of another jacket on there just so you can kind of read in
Um,
public.
well, probably. I mean, I did read the first 50 Shades of Grey.
Uh-huh.
I didn't leave that one lying around for my kids when they were little. But I do have a friend whose son knew that his mom really liked the first book of 50 Shades of Grey. So when he saw the second one at Target, he bought it for her for Mother's Day, not having any clue what it was. I thought that was kind of adorable.
I remember the craze and I bought them all. Um, at that time, not my flavor of read, but I still bought them all and walked in one day and my daughter was like, yeah, they were just meh. And she was maybe 18, 19, I think. And I said, where'd you see those? I don't even recall those being out. What else did you see, little lady?
Yeah, exactly. You gotta watch out.
Yeah, so she read them all before I did. Well, thank you, Karen. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. It's been great. I really enjoyed
And
it.
this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.